The first thing Adelaide Merefield noticed about the Duke of Davenhurst was that everyone in the gallery had already decided where not to look. It was London in the spring of 1863, and Davenhurst House stood in Mayfair with the grave confidence of a place that had never needed to explain its importance. Inside the long private gallery, candles burned beneath carved gilt sconces, ancestral portraits watched from panelled walls, and a dozen well-dressed guests spoke in softened voices while pretending not to wait for one man. Adelaide stood beside her easel with a charcoal stick resting between her fingers and understood the arrangement at once. She was present because she had been hired. Lady Prudence Sedgwick was present because she belonged. Sir Basil Crowther was present because men of influence were often allowed to stand anywhere they pleased, and somewhere beyond the closed doors, the Duke of Davenhurst was expected to enter a room already prepared to fear his face. "You will need to place the chair farther from the window," Lady Prudence said. Adelaide looked at the light, then at the chair. "No." Prudence blinked. "I beg your pardon. The light is better there." The left side of His Grace's face is not generally presented so directly. Adelaide met her gaze. Lady Prudence was beautiful in a controlled, polished way. Nothing about her dress, posture, or expression appeared accidental. "I was told the commission required a likeness," Adelaide said. "It does. Then I will need light." Sir Basil Crowther, standing near the mantel with one hand behind his back, gave a faint smile. "Miss Merefield is evidently devoted to principle." Adelaide turned toward him. "Only when it saves time." His smile thinned. Lady Prudence lowered her voice. "His Grace has endured enough staring." Adelaide looked again at the chair. "Then I shall not stare." Before Prudence could answer, the gallery doors opened. Conversation faded. Adelaide did not turn immediately. She watched the room instead. One woman lowered her eyes. A gentleman near the far wall pretended to examine a landscape. Lady Prudence straightened almost imperceptibly. Sir Basil's expression became attentive. Only then did Adelaide look toward the doorway. Rupert Redbourne, Duke of Davenhurst, entered without haste. He was taller than she had expected, broad-shouldered beneath a dark coat cut with severe simplicity. His hair was brown, touched faintly with silver near the temples. His face would have been called handsome if society had not first decided to call it damaged. The scar began at his left temple and crossed the upper cheek in a pale, irregular line. It did not deform him. It changed him. That was different. Adelaide looked at his eyes first. Grey, watchful, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Then she looked at the scar, because pretending not to see it would have been another form of dishonesty. Rupert noticed. She knew he did, because his gaze rested on her 1 second longer than courtesy required. Sir Basil stepped forward. "Your Grace, the young person engaged for the likeness has arrived." Adelaide did not react. She had been called worse things by men with less reason. Rupert did. "Miss Merefield is the artist commissioned by this house." Basil's expression barely shifted. "Of course." Rupert looked at Adelaide. "Miss Merefield," she inclined her head. "Your Grace, I am told you object to the chair, only to moving it," Lady Prudence said. "I merely suggested a more flattering position." Adelaide looked at Rupert, not Prudence. "The present position gives better light." Rupert glanced toward the tall window. "Then the chair stays." It was a small decision. Adelaide knew better than to make too much of it. Still, she saw Basil look at Prudence. She filed that away. Rupert sat. Adelaide stepped behind the easel and prepared the first sheet of brown paper. "How long must I remain still?" he asked. You need not remain entirely still. That sounds dangerously reasonable. I find people reveal more when they believe nothing is being asked of them. Something changed in his expression. Not amusement exactly, interest. And what are you asking of me? At present, only that you sit. Adelaide began to draw. The first lines came quickly, shape before detail, structure before surface. Rupert remained composed, though she noticed that he kept his left side, slightly turned away from the strongest light. She did not correct him. Not yet. Around them, the gallery resumed its careful breathing. Lady Prudence moved to a settee. Basil studied correspondence near the mantel, though Adelaide doubted he read a word of it. Rupert's gaze settled on her charcoal. You do not speak while you work. Sometimes. You have been silent for nearly 5 minutes. You noticed. I notice most things. Then we have that in common. A sound cracked suddenly from the street beyond the windows. A carriage wheel striking loose stone, perhaps. Nothing remarkable, yet Rupert's shoulders tightened before the noise had fully passed. His right hand closed once against the arm of the chair. Then he mastered the movement. No one else seemed to notice. Adelaide did. She lowered her eyes to the drawing before he could see that she had. A moment later, his posture returned to stillness. Basil looked up from the mantel, not with concern, with recognition. Adelaide's charcoal paused. There it was, a thread. Too thin to pull, but present, she resumed drawing. You are frowning, Rupert said. Am I? Slightly. Then perhaps I have found something difficult. My face, the proportion of your left eye. His mouth almost moved. You are blunt. Paint is expensive. Bluntness is free. This time he did smile, though only briefly. Lady Prudence watched from across the room. Adelaide continued until the study had enough life to become dangerous. She set down the charcoal. Finished? Rupert asked. For today. He rose and approached the easel. Adelaide stepped aside. The scar was there, not darker than necessary, not softened, not turned into a symbol, simply present. Rupert studied the drawing without speaking. Prudence came nearer. Her face tightened almost at once. It is rather pronounced. Adelaide said nothing. Basil joined them. A preliminary study allows for correction. Of proportion, Adelaide said. Of presentation, Basil replied. Society need not see every defect with equal fidelity. Rupert's gaze remained on the paper. Then he asked, Miss Merefield, do you consider it a defect? Adelaide looked at him. The gallery seemed to wait. She had the strange impression that everyone wanted the answer except the man who had asked for it. I consider it part of your face. Silence followed. Not long, long enough. Rupert looked again at the charcoal study. Do not change it. Adelaide picked up the charcoal. I had not intended to. Lady Prudence's lips pressed together. Basil glanced at her, and Adelaide saw something pass between them. Annoyance, perhaps. Rupert turned to leave. At the doorway, another sharp sound carried faintly from the street. This time, he did not react visibly. But Adelaide had already seen enough to know the first movement had not been ordinary surprise. War, she thought, or memory, perhaps both. Rupert paused with one hand on the doorframe and looked back at the study once more. Not at his eyes, at the scar. Then he left. The room changed after him. Lady Prudence waited until the doors closed. Sir Basil set aside the papers he had not been reading. Adelaide began cleaning charcoal dust from her fingers. An unusual first sitting, Basil said. Most first sittings are. His Grace seemed interested in your methods. He asked 3 questions. For the Duke of Davenhurst, that may qualify as enthusiasm. Adelaide closed the wooden case containing her charcoal. Then I am honoured. Prudence rose from the settee. Miss Merefield, you understand that this portrait will not remain private. I assumed as much. It will be seen by people whose opinions matter. Adelaide fastened one brass clasp. Opinions frequently matter most to those who possess them. Basil's eyes sharpened. Prudence walked to the gallery doors and closed them herself. The click of the latch was soft. Adelaide looked up. Lady Prudence returned to the table beside the easel. From beneath a folded shawl, she withdrew a small velvet purse and placed it on the polished wood. The sound of coins settling inside it was unmistakable. Adelaide did not touch it. "What is that?" she asked. Prudence's expression was calm. Basil moved closer. "An adjustment to your fee." Adelaide looked from the purse to the charcoal study resting against the easel. "For what adjustment?" Lady Prudence followed her gaze to Rupert's drawn face. Her answer came without hesitation. "The scar," she said. "You will paint it away." Adelaide looked at the velvet purse, but did not reach for it. The coins inside had settled into silence, yet she could still hear what they represented. Rent for several months, new brushes, better canvas, coal through winter, the possibility of refusing one humiliating commission without fearing the next week. She had lived long enough in reduced circumstances to know the exact weight of money before touching it. "You wish me to remove the scar entirely?" she asked. Lady Prudence folded her hands. "You make it sound vulgar. I am trying to make it precise." Sir Basil stepped nearer the table. "No one is asking for deception. Portraiture has always involved judgment." Adelaide glanced at the charcoal study. "Judgment, yes. Invention is another matter." "Then soften it," Prudence said. "A little." Adelaide looked at her. "How much is a little?" Prudence's expression tightened, enough that it does not dominate his face. It does not dominate his face now. Society will think otherwise. Then society has already made its decision. Basil exhaled with patient condescension. "Miss Merefield, you are young enough to mistake stubbornness for integrity." Adelaide met his gaze. "I am 31. All the more reason to understand reality." "I do." Her eyes dropped once more to the purse. That was the cruelest part. She understood reality perfectly. She knew what refusal cost. She knew how quickly respectable people stopped recommending a woman once she became inconvenient. She knew that talent did not pay bills unless someone with influence decided to admire it. Prudence seemed to read the hesitation. She pushed the purse a few inches closer. "There is enough there to make this worth your discretion." Adelaide did not ask how much. If she knew the exact sum, refusal might become harder. "Does His Grace know?" she asked. Prudence's gaze cooled. "Know what?" "That you wish me to paint another man wearing his clothes." Basil's face changed first. Prudence's followed. Adelaide continued before either could interrupt. "You do not want a softer likeness. You want a more convenient one." "His Grace has duties beyond personal preference," Basil said. "Political duties, family duties, obligations to his house, and his face interferes with them. Do not be childish." Adelaide turned toward him. "I am not the one frightened by a scar." Silence sharpened. Basil moved closer, though not enough to be threatening. He did not need to be. Men like him used position the way other men used volume. You should think carefully before insulting those who can help your career. Adelaide closed the second brass clasp on her case. "Was that help?" "It can be. And if I refuse," Prudence answered this time, "then perhaps future patrons will find you less suitable than they first imagined." There it was, cleanly said. Adelaide felt no surprise. Only disappointment that the threat had arrived exactly where she expected it. Basil picked up the purse and weighed it once in his palm. You are an unmarried woman supporting yourself through commissions. Your father is gone. His name once opened doors for you, but names lose influence when the man carrying them is dead. You have no great family behind you, no fortune, no husband, no title. Cleverness without position can become expensive. Adelaide thought of the small rooms she rented, the coat she had mended twice, the stretch of winter when she had diluted pigment because replacing it would have meant choosing between paint and food. She thought of her father's old clients, some of whom remembered her only as the quiet daughter who mixed colors and carried tea. Basil was not wrong about the world. He was only wrong about what that knowledge allowed him to buy. She took the purse from his hand. Prudence relaxed. Basil's eyes showed satisfaction. Adelaide turned the purse over once, then placed it exactly where it had first been. No, Prudence stared. Do not be foolish. I am trying very hard not to be. You need the money. Adelaide's fingers rested on the lid of her case. Yes, that answer unsettled Prudence more than denial would have. Adelaide continued. I need it enough to know what refusing costs. Basil's expression hardened. Then perhaps you should reconsider. I already have. She removed her apron and folded it carefully. Labor can be purchased. Judgment cannot. Everything can be purchased, Basil said. Only by people who have never made anything worth keeping. His eyes narrowed. Prudence stepped forward. Miss Merefield, you were brought here because your work is competent and discreet. Do not mistake one afternoon of the Duke's attention for protection. Adelaide looked at her. I have not. Then understand your position. I do. Do you? Prudence's voice softened, becoming more dangerous. A woman in your circumstances does not survive by humiliating people above her. Adelaide held her gaze. Neither does an artist survive by signing lies. It is a scar. Yes, an ugly reminder of a terrible chapter. Perhaps. Then why preserve it? Adelaide looked at the charcoal study resting beside the easel. Rupert's face had emerged there with its restraint, fatigue, strength, and the mark everyone else had reduced to a problem. Because it is there. Prudence gave a short, incredulous laugh. That is your answer. It is enough. Basil took one step closer. Let us speak plainly. The Duke's future may depend on how he is received in London. Certain alliances require confidence. Appearances influence confidence. You are being offered more money to ensure the portrait serves the interests of the house that commissioned it. Adelaide lifted her case, then commissioned someone else. Prudence went still. You would leave? Yes, over this? No. Because of this. Adelaide nodded toward the purse. I was commissioned to paint the Duke of Davenhurst. I will not invent a more convenient face and sign my name beneath the lie. The words had barely settled when a man's voice came from the adjoining gallery. Then you will not. No one moved. Adelaide turned toward the half-open door beyond the far wall. Rupert stood there. She did not know how long he had been listening. Judging by Basil's sudden silence, neither did he. The Duke entered slowly. His gaze passed over the velvet purse, Adelaide's packed case, Prudence's rigid posture, and Basil's expression. Then it stopped on Adelaide. Were you leaving? He asked. Yes, Your Grace. Because of the portrait. Because I was instructed to paint one that does not exist. Rupert looked at Prudence. Is that true? She recovered quickly. Rupert, this is being made unnecessarily dramatic. That was not my question. Prudence drew a breath. We were discussing presentation. Were you discussing the removal of my scar? She said nothing. Rupert looked at Basil. You may answer. Basil folded his hands behind his back. The intention was to ensure the portrait served the larger interests of the house. By changing my face, by presenting it wisely. Rupert's eyes cooled. How fortunate that wisdom resembles concealment. Adelaide remained still. He turned to her. How much were you offered? I did not count it. Why not? Because I intended to refuse. Something changed in his face. Not warmth, recognition. He looked again at the purse, and if you had accepted, then I would not have remained worthy of the signature beneath the painting. Prudence said, "This is absurd. Artists alter appearances constantly." Adelaide did not look at her. Rupert did. Not this one. The room became quiet. He walked to the table and pushed the purse back toward Prudence with 2 fingers. "You will not instruct Miss Merefield again." Prudence's composure fractured. "Rupert, nor will Sir Basil." Basil's jaw tightened. "Your Grace, surely the household must retain some authority over a commission made in its name." "It does." Rupert looked directly at him. "Mine." Basil bowed slightly. "As you wish." Rupert turned to Adelaide. "You will be paid in full whether you stay or leave." She said nothing. "No fee will be withheld. No unfavorable recommendation will be issued. No one connected to this house will use your circumstances to purchase your silence." Adelaide studied him. "And if I stay?" Rupert's gaze held hers. "You paint what you see." The answer came without hesitation. Adelaide felt the room narrow around those 6 words. No praise, no request for gratitude, no attempt to tell her what courage should look like. Just terms. She looked at the charcoal study, then at the scar on his face. "Then I have conditions." Basil gave a faint sound of disbelief. Rupert ignored him. "Name them." "No one touches the canvas without my permission. No adjustments after I leave the room. No instructions through intermediaries, and I do not sign the final portrait until I consider it finished." Rupert nodded once. "Agreed." Prudence stared at him. "You cannot mean to give a tradeswoman authority over a ducal commission." Rupert turned toward her. "Over the painting, yes." Then he looked back at Adelaide. "Will you stay?" She rested one hand on the closed case. She could still leave. Pride would make that easy. Fear would make it easier. Yet something more difficult than both held her there, the chance to make one honest thing and put her own name beneath it. "Yes," she said. Rupert's expression did not change, but his shoulders eased almost imperceptibly. "Good." Basil looked toward the charcoal study. For only a second, something passed through his face. Not anger, not contempt. Calculation. Adelaide saw it. So did Rupert. He gave no sign. Instead, he said, "From this moment, Miss Merefield takes her instructions from me alone." The gallery remained quiet after Rupert's declaration, but the silence no longer belonged to him alone. It had changed shape. Before, everyone had watched Adelaide as though her presence depended on permission. Now Sir Basil watched her as though she had become a complication. Lady Prudence watched Rupert as though he had violated an arrangement no one had bothered to explain to him. Adelaide saw both reactions and stored them away. Rupert did not repeat himself. "Tomorrow morning," he said. 10 o'clock. Adelaide rested one hand on the closed wooden case. "I will be here." Basil stepped forward. "Your Grace, perhaps it would be wiser to formalize the revised terms before the work continues." Rupert looked at him. "They are formal enough. A ducal commission should not rest on conversation. Most promises do." Basil's expression tightened. "I only mean that responsibilities should be clear." "Then let us make them so." Rupert turned toward Adelaide. "The canvas remains under your control. No one alters it without your permission. No instruction concerning the likeness is valid unless I give it directly to you." You sign only when you decide the portrait is complete. Payment will not be reduced if I dislike the result. Adelaide held his gaze, and if someone else dislikes it, that is their burden. Lady Prudence rose. Rupert, you are treating this as though Basil and I attempted some crime. No, his voice remained calm. I am treating it as though you attempted to purchase a falsehood in my name. Prudence went pale. Basil intervened before she could answer. No one intended disrespect. Rupert looked toward the velvet purse still resting on the table. Then your intentions were poorly dressed. Adelaide lowered her eyes before anyone could see the brief spark of amusement there. Rupert noticed anyway. She knew because something changed at the corner of his mouth, almost too slight to exist. Then he faced Basil again. Miss Merefield leaves this house today with the same standing she possessed when she entered it, of course. No rumor of incompetence. No suggestion of impropriety. No withdrawn recommendation. Basil's face went still. You imagine I would be so petty. I am removing the need for imagination. The words landed without force, and therefore carried more. Basil bowed. Prudence turned toward the door. I have no wish to remain where my concern is mistaken for cruelty. Adelaide said nothing. Rupert did. Concern does not require concealment. Prudence stopped, then left without looking back. Basil followed more slowly. At the doorway, his gaze shifted toward the charcoal study one last time. Adelaide saw calculation there again. This time Rupert did too. Neither spoke of it. When the doors closed, Rupert looked at Adelaide. You may still leave. I know. You would be paid. I know. Then why stay? She considered the question carefully. Because the terms changed, that is all. No. Rupert waited. Adelaide glanced toward the first study. Because I dislike unfinished work. His expression suggested he knew the answer was incomplete, convenient, accurate. He looked at her for a moment longer. 10 o'clock then. 10. The next morning, rain lay against the windows of Davenhurst House in thin silver lines. Adelaide arrived early and found the gallery already prepared. The chair remained exactly where she had placed it. No one had moved the easel. No one had touched the study. Mrs. Fenner sat near the far wall with embroidery in her lap, present as companion and witness. Adelaide arranged her brushes, mixed the first tones, and was reaching for a clean cloth when Rupert entered. He was 5 minutes early. You are early, she said, by 5 minutes. That still qualifies. I had not realized artists were so exacting. Only with time, light, proportion, payment, materials, and truth. Rupert removed his gloves. A modest list. He sat. Adelaide looked at the light. It fell evenly across both sides of his face. Yesterday he had kept the scar partially away from it. Today he had not. She said nothing. She began. For several minutes, only the faint movements of brush against palette and rain against glass disturbed the room. Rupert watched her work. You stayed because the terms changed. Yes. And because you dislike unfinished work. Yes. You left something out. Adelaide did not look up. Possibly. Deliberately. Probably. You are very difficult to question. I was not aware I was being questioned. You noticed. Yes. Rupert leaned back slightly. Then answer. Adelaide mixed a darker tone. I stayed because you did not ask me to be grateful. He became still. She continued before the silence grew awkward. Men in powerful positions often mistake basic fairness for generosity. You did not. You sound surprised. Experience encourages caution. And has mine encouraged anything else? Adelaide looked at him then. Not yet. For the first time that morning, he smiled. It disappeared quickly. She returned to the canvas, turned slightly toward the window. He obeyed. but not enough. More. He moved another inch. Again, his gaze sharpened. You are determined to have the scar in full light. I am determined to see the structure of your face. That was not an answer. It was the accurate one. He fell quiet. Adelaide lifted the brush. Why did you not look away yesterday? Rupert asked. Her hand stopped for less than a second. I was looking at you. Everyone else was also looking at me. No, most were looking at the scar while pretending not to. His eyes changed. Adelaide continued. That is different. And you? I looked at your eyes first. Why? Because I was trying to see your face. Rupert's expression tightened, almost defensively. A scar is not the opposite of a face, Your Grace. Something passed through him. Not relief. Relief would have been easier. This was closer to being seen without permission to hide. He turned fully then, slowly, until the scarred side of his face met the strongest light in the room. Adelaide did not praise him. She did not soften her expression. She simply raised the brush and continued painting. That was what he had asked for. It was also what he seemed to need. The sitting settled into a quieter rhythm. Adelaide worked around the brow and left cheek, building shadow without exaggerating the scar. Rupert watched the canvas emerge. You do not make it darker. Why would I? To make a point. I am painting a face, not delivering a sermon. You may be the first artist I have met who believes restraint can be dramatic. Restraint usually is. The gallery door opened. Basil entered, carrying a leather folio. Rupert's shoulders changed before his expression did. Adelaide noticed. She lowered the brush. You became a different man before he entered the room. Rupert looked at her sharply. Basil paused. I hope I have not interrupted anything of importance. Only observation, Adelaide said. Rupert's gaze remained on her for a second longer, then shifted to Basil. What is it? Basil approached. Correspondence regarding House Sedgwick. The proposed alliance is attracting interest from men who matter. Rupert's face went blank. There is no alliance. Not yet. Basil opened the folio, but the arrangement would strengthen the parliamentary bloc supporting Lord Wexham's appointment and secure the intermediary role we have discussed. Adelaide kept her attention on the palette, though every word registered. Basil continued. Years of preparation are involved. Expectations are already forming. Rupert's voice cooled. Your expectations are not my obligations. Basil's expression shifted almost invisibly. No, but refusing at this stage would have consequences for several men whose futures are tied to your influence. Including yours, the question was quiet. Basil hesitated, only once. Including mine. Adelaide looked up, there it was. Not merely loyalty, need. Rupert closed the folio with one hand. Then I suggest you build a future that does not depend on my marriage. Basil's jaw tightened. Society rarely waits for facts when expectations are more useful. Then society may entertain itself elsewhere. Basil bowed. As you wish. Before leaving, he looked at Rupert. More precisely, he looked at the scar in full light. His expression was not disgust. It was calculation sharpened by unease. Adelaide felt it immediately. Rupert did too. After the door closed, he said, What are you thinking? Adelaide cleaned the brush. That Sir Basil did not like what he saw. Rupert glanced toward the door. My refusal? No. She looked directly at him. You turning your face toward the light. He said nothing. The rain continued against the windows. When the sitting ended, Adelaide packed her brushes and left with Mrs. Fenner. Rupert remained behind. For several minutes he stood alone before the tall mirror at the end of the gallery. Then, slowly, he turned the scarred side of his face toward the glass. In the shadow of the distant doorway, Unseen by Rupert, Sir Basil Crowther stopped and watched. 3 days later, Rupert noticed that Adelaide could paint a man's face without flinching and still hesitate before writing her own name. The discovery came near the end of a morning sitting at Davenhurst House. Rain had cleared from London, leaving the gallery bright enough for Adelaide to work without lamps. Rupert sat where the northern light reached both sides of his face, and the portrait had begun to acquire the unmistakable weight of a living person rather than a collection of careful lines. The scar was there. So were the tired eyes, the reserved mouth, and the quiet severity that made strangers mistake silence for coldness. Adelaide stepped back from the canvas, studied the proportions, then reached for a small sheet on which she had made a color notation. At the bottom, her charcoal paused. Rupert watched her write 2 letters. A.M., then she set the charcoal down. "Why do you do that?" he asked. Adelaide looked up. "Do what?" "Pretend not to understand questions. It saves time when the question is poor. This one is not. That remains to be seen." Rupert nodded toward the paper. "Why initials?" Adelaide's fingers rested beside the charcoal. "They identify me." "Barely. Identification need not be decorative. Your full name is not decoration." She looked at him then. His expression carried no command, only curiosity sharpened by observation. That made the question harder to dismiss. "It is habit," she said. "A habit generally begins somewhere. So does rain. That does not mean I intend to investigate every cloud." Mrs. Fenner, seated near the far wall, lowered her embroidery to hide what might have been a smile. Rupert did not. "You dislike the question." "I dislike the assumption that every silence is an invitation." The words came more sharply than Adelaide intended. Rupert went still. She expected him to press. Instead, he said, "Then I withdraw it." Adelaide looked at him. "Just so? You set terms concerning the portrait. I assume you are permitted terms concerning yourself." Something in her chest shifted. Not gratitude. She was wary of gratitude when basic respect was involved, yet she could not deny the difference between a man who stopped when asked and those who believed persistence was a form of authority. She returned to the canvas, turned slightly toward me. Rupert obeyed. The sitting had barely resumed when the gallery door opened and a lady of perhaps 60 entered with the confidence of someone who had known the house long enough not to wait for ceremony. She wore dove-grey silk and carried a silver-headed cane she did not appear to need. Rupert rose. "Lady Agneta." "Sit down, Rupert. You are being painted, not crowned." Her gaze moved to Adelaide. "And this must be Miss Merefield." Adelaide inclined her head. "Lady Agneta." "Belmore," the older woman added, "though I have survived long enough to forgive people who forget." Rupert said, "You did not announce yourself." "I did. Your butler has excellent hearing. You have poor tolerance for visitors." Lady Agneta approached the easel. Adelaide instinctively shifted half a step, enough to protect the wet surface without making a scene. The older woman noticed. "Good. A painter who guards her work. Paint dries badly under fingerprints. So do reputations." Lady Agneta studied the portrait. Her expression changed almost at once. She leaned closer, though not enough to endanger the canvas. "How curious." Adelaide waited. "I have seen that hand before." The gallery became quiet. Adelaide's pulse changed. Rupert noticed. She knew because his attention left the portrait and settled on her. Lady Agneta turned. "Your father was Edmund Merefield." "Yes, he painted my sister." Adelaide said nothing. Lady Agneta continued, and Lady Wexford in blue velvet. Sir Thomas Pell, with the ridiculous spaniel he insisted be included. Lord Felbridge, shortly before he married that dreadful woman from Kent. Rupert's mouth almost moved. Adelaide kept her expression still. My father had many commissions, indeed. Lady Agneta looked back at the portrait of Rupert. But this is not merely similar training. She pointed toward the painted eyes. This restraint, the refusal to flatter the gaze. I remember it. Adelaide felt the room narrowing. Painters influence their pupils. Were you his pupil? His daughter? That was not my question, Rupert said quietly. Lady Agneta. The warning was mild. The older woman looked at him. I am not trying to embarrass her, Adelaide answered before Rupert could. Yes, I learned from him. Lady Agneta's eyes returned to her. How much? Enough. Did you assist with my sister's portrait? Adelaide looked at the floor for 1 second. When she raised her eyes, Rupert had not moved. He was waiting, not demanding. That was somehow worse. Yes, Lady Agneta became very still. The eyes? Adelaide said nothing. The mouth? Partly. The hands? No. Adelaide exhaled. The left hand was his. The right was mine. Lady Agneta looked as though an old room in memory had just opened. And Lady Wexford's blue sleeve? Mine. Sir Thomas Pell? The dog was my father's. I am relieved. It was badly behaved even in paint. Mrs. Fenner made a small sound that might have been a cough. Lady Agneta continued, softer now. Lord Felbridge's eyes? Adelaide looked at her. Mine. No one spoke. The older woman studied Adelaide's face. How many? Rupert asked. The question came quietly. Adelaide turned toward him. He did not look triumphant for having uncovered what she had hidden. He looked angry, but not with her. How many were yours? He repeated. Adelaide could have lied. She had done so by omission for years. She could have said a few. She could have reduced the truth until it became bearable. Instead, she said, enough that I learned what it is to disappear while standing directly in front of people. The words settled into the gallery. Lady Agneta lowered her gaze. Rupert did not. Adelaide continued because stopping now would have felt like surrender. My father's eyesight began to fail. Slowly at first. He could still compose. He could still direct. But there were days when the details defeated him. So I helped. Helped, Rupert repeated. That was the word we used. Adelaide looked toward the wet portrait. Clients had paid for Edmund Merefield, not his unmarried daughter. His name opened doors. Mine would have closed them. He said it was temporary. He said there would be acknowledgement when the time was right. Lady Agneta asked, did that time come? Adelaide smiled without warmth. No. Why did you continue? Rupert asked. Because we needed the money. Because he was my father. Because each completed portrait meant another month of rent. Because by the time I understood what I was giving away, I had become too practiced at silence. No one answered immediately. Rupert's gaze moved to the small notation sheet, signed only AM. And now, Adelaide followed his eyes. Now the habit remains. Do you want it to? She looked at him. No. The answer surprised her with its simplicity. Rupert nodded once. Then what do you want? It was not a grand question. He did not ask what would repair the past or restore every stolen year. Adelaide appreciated him for that. My own name. Lady Agneta looked again at the portrait. You should have it. Adelaide's expression tightened. With respect, my lady, I do not need permission. Lady Agneta held her gaze for a moment, then smiled faintly. No, you do not. Before leaving, she paused beside Adelaide. My sister's portrait hangs in the morning room at Belmore House. I shall see it differently now. Adelaide did not know whether that was apology, regret, or merely truth. Perhaps it was enough. After Lady Agneta departed, Rupert summoned his secretary. Adelaide expected some matter, regarding the commission. Instead, he said, "From this day forward, every invoice, receipt, payment record, and document connected with Miss Merefield's work is to bear her full name. No initials, no reference to her father unless she requests it." The secretary nodded. "Yes, Your Grace." Adelaide looked at Rupert. "That was not necessary." "No. Then why do it?" "Because no one should have to ask twice to be named correctly." Something moved through her before she could prevent it. She turned away, picked up the small notation sheet, and looked at the two letters at the bottom. AM. Then she crossed them out. Slowly, deliberately, she wrote beneath them, "Adelaide Merefield." Rupert watched her hand move. He said nothing. That silence felt different from all the others. By the following afternoon, arrangements had been made to continue the commission at Davenhurst Court in Hampshire, where Rupert intended to spend several weeks on estate business. Adelaide would travel with Mrs. Fenner, maintain her own rooms, and work under the same terms already agreed in London. She accepted. The greater light and quieter setting would benefit the portrait. That was the reason she gave herself. Sir Basil Crowther also announced his intention to go, claiming that discussions concerning House Sedgwick and the parliamentary appointment could not be postponed. Rupert's expression made clear he disliked the decision. But Basil had long-standing business at Davenhurst Court and arrived with papers sufficient to justify his presence. On the morning before departure, Adelaide returned to the gallery to pack the charcoal study. She found Basil standing several feet from it. He was not touching the drawing. He was only looking. "You seem interested in my work," Adelaide said. Basil turned. His expression became smooth at once. "I am interested in anything that alters the course of a great house. It is charcoal on paper. Sometimes small things have inconvenient consequences." Adelaide closed the portfolio around the study, only for people who have reason to fear them. Basil looked at her for a long moment, then he smiled. "I hope you enjoy Hampshire, Miss Merefield." Adelaide fastened the clasp. "I intend to." As he left, she noticed that he had not once looked at the finished canvas, only the charcoal study. And for the first time, Adelaide wondered whether Sir Basil Crowther was not offended by what she saw in Rupert's face, but afraid of it. Adelaide first saw Davenhurst Court beneath a pale Hampshire sky, its long stone front rising beyond broad lawns and ancient trees, with the quiet certainty of a house that had survived too many generations to be impressed by any one of them. The journey from London had left Mrs. Fenner tired and Adelaide restless, but the moment the carriage turned through the iron gates, Adelaide understood why Rupert had chosen to continue the commission there. Light seemed to reach the estate from every direction. It lay across the terraces, caught on tall windows, and moved through the trees in shifting bands. The house itself was grand without being delicate. Nothing about it asked to be admired. That, she thought, suited its owner. Rupert met them in the entrance hall rather than sending a servant. "Miss Merefield, Mrs. Fenner." He inclined his head. "I hope the journey was tolerable." Mrs. Fenner answered before Adelaide could. "The road was tolerable. My back is less forgiving." Rupert looked almost amused. "Then I shall blame the road and spare your back. Very wise, Your Grace." Adelaide glanced around the high hall. Portraits lined the walls, though none were as recent as the one she had come to complete. "Your house appears to have survived our arrival." Rupert followed her gaze. "So far, I am relieved. You sound disappointed." "Only slightly." He led them toward the east wing, where rooms had been prepared for Adelaide and Mrs. Fenner beside one another a propriety Adelaide appreciated without comment. The studio, however, was not inside the main house. Rupert took them through a side passage and across a gravel path toward an old orangery at the southern edge of the estate. Ivy had begun claiming one corner. Several upper panes were clouded with age. Inside, dust softened the long stone floor, and empty planting beds stood where citrus trees had once grown. Yet the northern wall held tall windows, and the light was extraordinary. Adelaide stepped into the center of the room and forgot the dust. "Well?" Rupert asked. She turned slowly. "You knew I would like it. I hoped." "That is more dangerous." "Why?" "Hope encourages people to mistake preference for permission." Rupert looked at her. "You think I am offering it to you?" "Are you?" "For the duration of the commission." "Then I accept. You defend against gifts I have not yet offered. Experience encourages preparation." Mrs. Fenner moved toward one of the windows. "The light is excellent." Adelaide nodded. "It is." Rupert looked around the abandoned room. "My mother used this place." Adelaide's attention returned to him. "For painting?" "No, citrus trees, winter flowers. Things she insisted England had no right to deny her simply because of weather." His voice changed slightly. "After she died, no one cared for the room properly." Adelaide did not offer sympathy. Instead, she looked again at the windows. "Then it remembers stubborn women." Rupert glanced at her. "Apparently." The next morning, the orangery had been transformed without losing its character. A large easel stood near the best northern light. 2 work tables had been cleaned. A small stove warmed the far wall, and fresh cloths, water jars, and stools had been arranged with practical care. Adelaide immediately noticed that no excessive decoration had been added. No flowers, no cushions, no attempt to make the place more feminine for her comfort. Rupert had prepared a working room, not a compliment. She respected that. A young assistant named Martha had been assigned to help with materials. She was perhaps 17, careful to the point of nervousness, and so eager not to make a mistake that Adelaide suspected she would soon make one. "Hold the varnish lower," Adelaide advised as Martha carried a small bottle across the studio. "If you grip it like a sacred relic, you will drop it." Martha flushed. "Yes, Miss Merefield." "And breathe." "Yes, Miss Merefield." Adelaide almost smiled. That too. Mrs. Fenner had settled near the far end with her embroidery when Sir Basil entered without knocking. Martha, startled by the sudden movement and his sharp voice, turned too quickly. "You there. Be careful with that." The bottle slipped from her fingers. It struck the edge of the table, tipped, and spilled across a folded cloth before Adelaide caught it. Martha went white. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Basil looked at the dark spreading stain. Carelessness. Adelaide set the bottle upright. "The fault is mine." Martha looked at her in surprise. Basil did too. "Yours? I arranged the table too near the walkway. You did not drop it." "No." Adelaide folded the stained cloth inward. "But I am responsible for the studio." Basil's gaze shifted to Martha. An incompetent assistant is not improved by excuses. Martha lowered her eyes. Adelaide said, "Fear rarely improves steady hands. Perhaps dismissal does." The orangery door opened behind him. Rupert entered. He looked from Basil to Martha, then to the spilled varnish. "What happened?" Basil answered first. The girl was careless. Rupert looked at Martha. "Were you?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Adelaide said the bottle was placed too near the edge. Rupert's eyes moved to her. "That was not what I asked." Adelaide understood immediately. He was giving Martha the question, not Basil. She stepped aside. Rupert waited. He did not soften his expression or offer reassurance. He simply left room for truth. Martha swallowed. Sir Basil startled me, Your Grace. I turned too quickly. Basil's face hardened. I spoke because she was carrying the bottle improperly. Martha lowered her gaze again. Adelaide said, and now she has told the truth. Rupert looked at the ruined cloth. Was anything valuable lost? A little varnish. Adelaide said, nothing more. Rupert nodded. Then nothing more will be lost? Basil stared at him. Rupert continued, Martha remains. Your Grace, discipline exists for a reason. So does proportion. His gaze cooled. And from now on, no one outside Miss Merefield's studio arrangement dismisses or threatens dismissal of her assistants without my knowledge. Basil's expression tightened. As you wish. He left soon after, carrying his displeasure with the rigid dignity of a man unused to being denied authority. Martha whispered, Thank you, Miss Merefield. Adelaide shook her head. Next time, tell the truth before I do. I was frightened. I know Adelaide handed her a clean cloth. Courage improves with use. The sitting began an hour later. Rupert took his place near the tall windows. The light was stronger than in London, cleaner too, and Adelaide worked on the left side of his face with new precision. For several minutes, everything settled into silence. Then the clouds shifted. Sunlight broke through the glass and struck directly across Rupert's scar. His reaction was immediate. His hand rose and covered part of it before he seemed aware of the movement. Adelaide lowered her brush. Rupert noticed. Why have you stopped? Because you have. I am still sitting. No, she set the brush against the pallet. You are hiding. His jaw tightened. And if I am, then I wait. He looked at her. You could continue from memory. I could. You have studied it long enough. Yes. Then why stop? Adelaide held his gaze. Because I will not take from you what you have not chosen to show me. The words altered something in the room. Rupert's hand remained over the scar. Adelaide did not move. Mrs. Fenner kept her eyes on her embroidery. Martha stood very still near the work table. At last, Rupert lowered his hand. Not quickly. Not as a performance. He turned his face back toward the light. Adelaide raised the brush and continued. Neither spoke for several minutes. Then, wind pressed suddenly against the old panes. One of the window latches rattled. The easel shifted on the uneven stone floor. Adelaide reached for it at the same moment Rupert did. Their hands met against the wooden frame. His fingers closed over hers for one startled second. Both froze. You may let go, Adelaide said quietly. Rupert looked at their hands. So may you. She released first. He steadied the easel, then returned to the chair. The air between them had changed, though neither acknowledged it. Adelaide painted until the light weakened. Later, after the sitting ended, she crossed the main house to ask Rupert about the following day's schedule. The study door stood partly open. She knocked and heard no answer. Inside, a silver war medal lay beside a faded miniature of a younger man with Rupert's eyes and an easier smile. Adelaide was still looking when Rupert entered behind her. She stepped back at once. Forgive me. The door was open. You were looking at the miniature. It was not an accusation. Adelaide nodded. Who is he? Rupert came to the desk. For a moment he said nothing. Then he lifted the miniature carefully, as though the years had not made it any less breakable. My brother. Adelaide looked from the painted face to the medal. He served with you? Rupert's fingers tightened around the miniature. Yes. His free hand rose almost unconsciously to the scar crossing his left cheek. He died the day I received this. Rupert's hand remained against the scar for a moment after he spoke, as though the touch had become inseparable from the memory. Adelaide looked from the miniature in his hand to the war medal on the desk. She did not ask another question. Outside the study windows, the last light of afternoon lay across the lawn in pale bands, but Rupert had turned slightly away from it. "His name was Philip," he said at last. Adelaide stayed where she was. "He looks younger than you." He was, by 4 years. "And he served with you?" "Yes." The answer came too quickly. Silence followed it. Adelaide had learned that silence was not always emptiness. Sometimes it was the only form in which pain could speak without being exposed. She moved no closer. "You do not have to tell me more." Rupert gave a short, humorless smile. "That is the second time you have refused to demand something from me." "Only the second? I have not kept count." "That seems unlikely." For a moment, something softened in his face. Then he looked back at the miniature. "We were in Crimea. There was an engagement outside Sebastopol. Orders shifted. Men were separated from their positions. I made a decision that sent part of our line forward." Adelaide said nothing. Philip was attached elsewhere, but the confusion was considerable. There was an explosion. I remember waking with half the world shouting and the other half gone quiet. I remember blood on my collar before I understood that my face had been cut. His hand tightened around the miniature. Philip did not return. Adelaide looked at him carefully. "And you believe your order caused his death?" Rupert's gaze hardened. "I know what I ordered. That was not what I asked." His eyes lifted to hers. "You are persistent, accurate." The familiar word passed between them, but neither smiled. Rupert set the miniature on the desk. Sir Basil was there. Adelaide's attention sharpened. "In Crimea?" "Yes, he was among the surviving officers. He knew the positions. He knew which orders had been issued. He knew what happened afterward." "And what did he tell you?" Rupert looked toward the windows. "That a commander lives with the consequences of his judgment." Adelaide felt something cold settle under her ribs. "That is not an answer." It was his. "Did he tell you that Philip died because of your command?" Rupert did not reply immediately, not in those words. Then what words did he use? Enough. The single word landed harder than detail would have. Adelaide understood. Basil had not needed to accuse Rupert directly. He had only needed to keep guilt alive and call it duty. "How long has he spoken to you that way?" she asked. "Years. And you trusted him?" Rupert's expression closed. "He was there." "That is not the same thing." "No." Adelaide looked again at Philip's painted face. The smile in the miniature was easier than Rupert's, almost irreverent. It seemed impossible that such a man would have wanted his brother to spend a lifetime serving a private sentence. "I will not tell you it was not your fault," Adelaide said. Rupert looked at her sharply. "Why not?" "Because I do not know that." Surprise crossed his face. "Most people say it. Most people prefer comfort to uncertainty. And you do not. Not when comfort requires dishonesty." He studied her. Adelaide continued. "But I also cannot paint guilt out of a face any more honestly than I can paint a scar out of one." Rupert went still. The words seemed to reach some guarded place in him that sympathy never could. "You think guilt shows in my face. Sometimes. That is not flattering. You hired the wrong artist for flattery." A breath left him that might almost have been a laugh. "So I did." The next morning, the sitting resumed in the orangery, under a soft grey sky. Martha arranged brushes with exaggerated care. Mrs. Fenner sat nearby with her embroidery. Adelaide worked on the left side of Rupert's face, building the subtle changes of colour around the scar rather than treating it as a separate object. He had not covered it once. She noticed. She said nothing. "You are quieter today," Rupert said. "I am working." You were working yesterday when you accused Sir Basil of borrowing authority. I did not accuse him. I observed him, a distinction you enjoy. Because it is useful. Rupert watched her for another moment. You distrust him. Adelaide did not stop painting. Do you? That was not my question. It should be. His expression sharpened, but before he could answer, the orangery door opened. Sir Basil entered carrying a leather folio. His timing was too precise to feel accidental. Your Grace. Forgive the interruption. Rupert's shoulders changed almost imperceptibly. Adelaide saw it. Basil saw it too. That troubled her more. What is it? Rupert asked. News from London. Basil came no farther than the edge of the working area. The Sedgwick alliance is attracting attention. Several men connected with Lord Wexham's parliamentary circle have begun to assume the matter will proceed. Rupert's face became unreadable. There is no engagement, no formal one, no private one either. Basil inclined his head. Society rarely waits for facts when expectations are more useful. Adelaide lowered her brush. Useful to whom? Basil turned toward her. To families, to political allies, to men whose futures depend on stable influence. Rupert's voice cooled. Including yours? Basil hesitated. Only once. Including mine. The answer changed the room. Rupert looked at him. Explain. Basil held the folio against one arm. The alliance would strengthen the parliamentary bloc supporting Lord Wexham's appointment. I have spent years building the connections that make such influence possible. With House Redbourne and House Sedgwick aligned, several positions could be secured. Mine among them. Adelaide watched Rupert closely. Something in his expression became very still. So, my marriage is part of your political design. Your marriage would affect more than yourself. That is the nature of rank. And my face. Basil's gaze flickered toward the scar before he could stop it. Your appearance affects confidence. Adelaide saw the mistake. Rupert did too. Whose confidence? He asked. Basil recovered. Society's. Adelaide said. Society seems remarkably delicate. Basil looked at her. Miss Merefield, great houses cannot afford to indulge every private sentiment. Yet, they seem willing to indulge public vanity. Enough, Rupert said, though the warning was not for Adelaide. Basil's mouth tightened. Rupert continued, there is no engagement, there is no agreement, and there will be no political appointment secured by treating my life as a document awaiting signatures. Basil's face hardened. You may dismiss the arrangement, but expectations already exist. Then disappoint them. That would cost more than you think, not to me. For the first time, Basil's composure cracked enough for Adelaide to see what lay beneath it. Not loyalty, fear. His future was not adjacent to Rupert's choices. It depended on them. Basil bowed. As you wish. Before leaving, his eyes moved to the unfinished portrait. They stopped at the scar, not with disgust. With calculation, Adelaide waited until the door closed. He needs the alliance. Rupert remained seated, apparently, more than Prudence does, perhaps, and he needs you to believe you owe the world something. Rupert looked at her. Careful, Miss Merefield. I am being careful. You are speaking about a man who served beside me. Then perhaps he deserves trust. Rupert said nothing. Adelaide mixed a darker tone, and perhaps he has benefited from it. Silence followed. Rupert did not defend Basil, that mattered. Adelaide lifted her brush. Turn slightly toward me. He obeyed. For several minutes, she worked without speaking. Then Rupert asked, Do you hate it? Adelaide looked up. What? His fingers rose, then stopped before touching the scar. This. The question was plain. The fear beneath it was not. Adelaide set down the brush. No. He waited. I hate what other people have taught you to believe it proves." Rupert did not move. "And what do you think I believe? That survival must be a confession." His eyes changed. Adelaide saw the wound open, not in his face, but behind it. She picked up the brush again before pity could enter the room. "Hold still," he did. For the first time, she completed the scar on the official portrait. Rupert watched her hand move over the canvas without looking away. Later, after the sitting ended, Adelaide secured her materials inside the locked portfolio. She did not see Basil standing beyond the glass corridor until she turned. His gaze was fixed, not on the large canvas, but on the brown paper charcoal study resting inside the open case. The moment he realized she had seen him, his expression smoothed, yet fear had already crossed it. Briefly, clearly, and Adelaide understood with sudden certainty that Sir Basil Crowther was afraid of a drawing. The portrait left Davenhurst Court under seal 3 days later, and Adelaide watched the crate being closed with more unease than she cared to admit. She had inspected every inch of the canvas before it was wrapped. The scar remained exactly as she had painted it. Rupert's left cheek carried the pale, irregular line that society wished hidden. But the portrait did not make the scar the center of his face. His eyes remained the first thing a viewer should notice. His restraint the second. The scar belonged there because it belonged to him. Nothing more, nothing less. At Rupert's instruction, the finished canvas was placed in a wooden crate, secured in the orangery, and the studio door sealed before transport. The painting travelled to London under household custody and was installed behind a curtain in the gallery at Davenhurst House, shortly before the private viewing. Adelaide arrived after the canvas had been placed. She was told the seals had appeared undisturbed. She accepted that report because Rupert himself had ordered the precautions. By dusk, the gallery was full. Patrons, artists, titled women, political men, and several former clients moved beneath crystal chandeliers and gilt frames with the polished curiosity of people who believed scandal was vulgar until it occurred in the right house. Adelaide stood beside Mrs. Fenner near the long wall, wearing the best dark blue gown she owned. Rupert spoke with an elderly earl across the room. Lady Prudence stood near the fireplace in silver silk, serene enough to appear innocent of every unpleasant thought she had ever entertained. Sir Basil Crowther remained close to the veiled portrait. His calm troubled Adelaide more than open hostility would have. She looked once toward Rupert. He found her gaze across the crowd. The look lasted only a moment, but something in it eased her. Then Basil raised one hand. "Ladies and gentlemen." Conversation faded. Adelaide drew a quiet breath. The curtain fell. For one impossible second, she did not understand what she was seeing. The face on the canvas was Rupert's and was not Rupert's. The eyes were hers. The mouth was hers. The posture, the shadows, the restraint in the shoulders. All hers. But the scar was gone, not softened, not reduced by light, gone. The left cheek had been painted smooth, symmetrical, false. Adelaide felt the room tilt around her. Someone whispered, "How handsome." Another guest murmured that the likeness was remarkable. Adelaide heard the words as though from another chamber. Her gaze dropped to the lower corner. Her full signature remained beneath the lie. Adelaide Merefield. The sight struck harder than the altered face. She had spent years watching her work disappear beneath another person's name. Now someone had done the opposite. They had placed her name beneath work she had refused to make. Lady Prudence reached her first. "Miss Merefield." Her voice carried just enough to invite listeners. "You must be pleased. Adelaide looked at her. With what? Prudence's eyes widened. Your portrait. Adelaide turned back to the canvas. That is not my portrait. Nearby conversations stopped. Basil stepped away from the wall. You signed it. Adelaide faced him. I signed a different painting. Rupert had crossed the room now. He stopped several feet away, staring at the smooth left cheek. Adelaide saw shock in him before control returned. The scar was present when the portrait left Davenhurst Court, she said. Prudence gave a soft sigh. Perhaps this is not the moment. This is precisely the moment. More guests began listening. Basil reached inside his coat. Then perhaps we should be precise. He unfolded a document. Adelaide saw her name at the bottom before she saw the words above it. Basil handed the page to Rupert, an additional agreement concerning the final presentation of the likeness. Adelaide's skin went cold. Rupert read. His face changed. What is this? A private understanding, Basil said. Miss Merefield accepted additional payment in exchange for ensuring that the portrait was fit for public regard. The phrase struck Adelaide with sudden clarity. Fit for public regard. Basil had used language like it before. In London, at Davenhurst Court, in conversations about appearance and expectation. She looked directly at him. I never wrote that. Basil's expression remained smooth. It bears your signature. Then my signature was copied. Prudence lowered her eyes with practiced sorrow. This is becoming very unfortunate. Adelaide ignored her. Read the wording again. Rupert looked at the paper. His voice was quiet. In consideration for additional payment, the likeness is to be adjusted where necessary and made fit for public regard. The room tightened around her. Adelaide felt every gaze sharpen. These were people who decided which artist entered drawing rooms, whose names appeared in recommendations, whose work became fashionable, and whose disappeared. To them, she was not yet a woman defending truth. She was an unmarried artist of modest means, standing beside a document bearing her name and a portrait visibly changed. Poverty had always made guilt easy to believe. Prudence said softly, perhaps every principle has its price. Adelaide turned to her. Some do. Her voice did not shake. Others must be forged. A murmur moved through the room. Basil's expression hardened. That is a serious accusation. So is yours. Rupert remained silent. Adelaide looked at him, the man who had heard her refuse money. The man who had watched her sign her own name after years of initials. The man who had turned his scar toward the light, because she had not asked him to hide it. He was looking at the altered portrait as though the missing mark had opened a wound beneath the visible one. Adelaide understood then what Basil had done. This was not only an attack on her honesty. It had been designed to strike the exact place in Rupert where trust was weakest. Rupert, Prudence said gently, you need not endure this publicly. Basil stepped closer. Your Grace, the matter can be investigated privately. Adelaide moved toward the canvas. Do not touch it, Basil said. She stopped. The nearest lamp stood at an angle to the frame. Adelaide tilted her head. There, a difference in sheen across the left cheek. The surface caught light unevenly. Newer pigment above older glaze. She looked closer without touching. The scar was painted over after the first layer dried. Rupert's gaze snapped to her. You are certain? Yes. Can you prove it now? The question was reasonable. That did not stop it from hurting. Adelaide looked at him. Not to people who have already chosen which answer they prefer. Silence spread through the gallery. Rupert looked at the forged paper, then at Adelaide, then at the portrait. She saw the conflict in him. She also saw the moment fear won. The exhibition is over, he said. Basil opened his mouth. Rupert cut him off. Now. The command moved through the room. Servants stepped forward. Guests began collecting gloves and cloaks, whispering as they went. Adelaide remained still. She waited for Rupert to stand beside her. He did not. Instead, he said, "Miss Merefield, until I determine what happened, I think it is best that you leave Davenhurst House." The words were quiet. They did not need to be louder. Adelaide felt them with perfect clarity. Prudence lowered her gaze. Basil did not smile. He was too disciplined for that. Adelaide looked at Rupert. "You think I did this. I do not know what to think. That is not the same answer. I know. Do you?" His face tightened. "I need facts." Adelaide nodded slowly. "So do I." She glanced toward the departing guests. Every whisper leaving the gallery carried a version of her guilt with it. "But you had one fact before tonight." Rupert said nothing. "You heard me refuse the money. I remember. You watched me paint the scar. Yes, you knew what it cost me to place my own name beneath my own work." His jaw tightened. "Yes." Adelaide lifted her chin. "Then, you had enough to know whether I deserved to stand alone while this room judged me." He looked as though something had struck him. She continued before courage failed. "You have every right to doubt me, Your Grace. But you had a choice about whether the entire room was permitted to do it with you." Silence. No one near them moved. Adelaide picked up her gloves. "I will leave." Rupert's voice changed. Adelaide. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She almost stopped. Nearly. Instead, she turned toward the portrait one last time. The angled light slid across the smooth left cheek. The difference in sheen remained visible. Fresh paint over dried glaze. Someone had altered the canvas after she finished it. Someone had entered a secured room, broken trust, and used her name to make the lie appear true. Only 2 people besides Adelaide had practical access during the final week at Davenhurst Court, and sufficient reason to want the scar erased. Lady Prudence, Sedgwick. Sir Basil Crowther. Adelaide stepped through the gallery doors without looking back. The last thing she heard before they closed was not Rupert calling her name again. It was Basil saying softly, "Your Grace, I warned you that appearances have consequences." Rupert did not sleep that night. Before dawn, he returned to the gallery and ordered every curtain opened. Grey London light spread across the room, cold and unforgiving, and the altered portrait stood beneath it with the scar erased and Adelaide's full name still resting beneath the lie. Rupert moved a lamp closer, angled it toward the painted left cheek, and saw what Adelaide had seen before leaving. The surface caught the light unevenly. A newer layer sat above the older glaze. The work had been altered after it dried. The realization did not absolve him. It made his failure clearer. He had heard Adelaide refuse money. He had watched her sign her full name after years of being hidden beneath another man's. He had seen her protect Martha when no advantage could be gained from kindness. Yet when the room turned against her, he had chosen uncertainty over trust and silence over courage. The door opened behind him. His secretary entered carrying a small wooden case and a folded note. "Your Grace." Rupert turned. "What is it?" "The studio seal from Davenhurst Court. The steward sent it overnight, as you requested." Rupert took the case. Inside lay the wax impression used on the orangery door before the portrait left Hampshire. At first glance, it appeared intact. Then he held it near the window. A hairline crack crossed one side. The wax had been broken, warmed, and pressed back into place. Rupert's expression hardened. Who had access to the master keys during the final week? "The steward, yourself." Miss Merefield had her studio key. The secretary hesitated. Sir Basil requested access to the household key cabinet twice, claiming he needed papers from the West Study. And Lady Prudence? She stayed at Davenhurst Court for 2 nights during that same week. She was not formally given access. Rupert looked at him, formally. No, Your Grace. Rupert set the broken seal beside the portrait. Send for Martha. The young assistant arrived less than an hour later, pale from travel and clearly frightened by the summons. Rupert did not question her in the gallery. He took her into the smaller morning room, where sunlight, ordinary furniture, and Mrs. Fenner's absence made the interview less threatening. His secretary remained present. You are not in trouble, Rupert said. Martha nodded too quickly. Yes, Your Grace, that was not a warning. It was a fact. She swallowed. Yes, Your Grace. Rupert leaned back slightly. During the final week at Davenhurst Court, did you see anyone near the orangery after Miss Merefield left for the evening? Martha looked toward the floor. Rupert waited. He had learned from Adelaide that silence could be permission rather than pressure. At last, Martha said, Sir Basil. Rupert went still. Near the orangery or inside it? Near the door at first. And afterward, I had gone back because I forgot a cleaning cloth by the sink. He told me to return to the servants' wing. Did you see anything in his hand? Martha hesitated. A ring of keys. Rupert's eyes sharpened. Are you certain? I cannot say which keys, Your Grace, only that there were several together. Did you recognize the ring? It looked like the household set the steward sometimes carries. The secretary shifted slightly. Rupert noticed. What is it? The steward's master keys are kept on a brass ring with a flat oval tag. Martha looked up. Yes, like that. Rupert felt anger rise, but he kept his voice level. Did Sir Basil know you had seen him? Yes. What did he say? Martha's fingers tightened together. That I should not trouble important people with small observations. Rupert looked at her for a long moment. You did nothing wrong. Relief flashed across her face. Thank you, Your Grace. You will not be dismissed. You will not be questioned again without my knowledge. Martha nodded. When she had gone, Rupert returned to the gallery. The forged agreement lay on a table beside the broken seal. He read the phrase again. Fit for public regard. Something about it had bothered him the night before. Now he knew why. He opened a leather correspondence box. Basil had left at Davenhurst House months earlier. The phrase appeared in a memorandum about a political dinner, then in a note concerning Lady Prudence's social position, then in a letter about Rupert's public image after the war. Fit for public regard, not proof, but pattern. Rupert closed the box and stared at the altered portrait. By afternoon, he was at Adelaide's modest London residence. He arrived properly, in daylight, with his secretary waiting in the front hall and Mrs. Fenner seated in the adjoining room with the door open. Adelaide entered, wearing a simple grey dress. Her face was composed. That composure hurt more than tears would have. Rupert stood. Miss Merefield, Your Grace. The formality between them was deserved. May I speak with you? You are already doing so. The old rhythm was there, but warmth was not. Rupert accepted that too. The portrait was altered after the original glaze had dried. Adelaide said nothing. The studio seal was broken and reset. Martha saw Sir Basil near the orangery after hours carrying a key ring that matched the household master set. I also found the phrase from the forged agreement in several of his letters. Adelaide's expression did not change. Then you have facts. Yes. Good. Rupert looked at her. That is not why I came. She waited. He had rehearsed explanations in the carriage and discarded everyone because each centered his discomfort. Now only the truth remained. I chose my fear over your word, he said. Adelaide's eyes sharpened. I permitted my silence to strengthen their lie. That was my doing. She held his gaze. Yes. Rupert took the answer without defense. I should have stood beside you. Yes. I should not have asked you to leave while the room was still deciding what to believe. No. He breathed in slowly. I am sorry. Adelaide looked away for 1 second, then back at him. I believe you. Relief almost came. Then she continued. That does not mean trust returns because you have named its absence. Rupert nodded. I know, do you? I am beginning to. Silence settled between them, painful but clean. Rupert did not offer money. He did not offer protection. He did not reach for rank. What would repair what happened? He asked. Adelaide studied him carefully. The truth. Where the accusation was made. Rupert understood. The gallery, the same room, the same kind of witnesses, the same people who watched me leave. You want another public viewing. I want the truth to stand where the lie stood. Rupert did not argue. Then it will. Adelaide's expression shifted slightly, as though she had expected resistance. You agree that quickly. I failed you once by deciding fear knew better than you did. I will not repeat it by turning your answer into a negotiation. Something in her face softened, though not enough to call forgiveness. Good. You will decide how the evidence is presented. Yes. You will speak for yourself. Yes. And I will stand where you tell me. Adelaide looked at him for a long moment. Beside me. Rupert held her gaze. Beside you. A knock sounded from the hall. Mrs. Fenner entered carrying 3 returned calling cards. Adelaide recognized the names at once. 2 were patrons. The 3rd belonged to Lady Harbury, a woman whose approval influenced several London art circles. Adelaide took the cards and placed them on the table. Her face remained calm, but Rupert saw the cost in the way her fingers paused over the last name. The lie is moving quickly, he said. Adelaide looked at the cards. Lies usually do when they are carried by people with carriages. Despite himself, Rupert almost smiled. She did not. She lifted Lady Harbury's card and turned it over once. Then the lie has begun earning interest. Rupert looked at her. We will stop it. Adelaide raised her eyes. No. He went still. We will prove it wrong. The distinction mattered. Rupert understood that now. Outside, another carriage drew up before the house. Adelaide did not look toward the window. She gathered the returned cards into a neat stack and said, Bring me the altered portrait, the broken seal, Basil's letters, and every document connected to the commission. Rupert nodded. Anything else? Adelaide looked at him. Yes. Name it. Do not ask me to forgive you before I am ready. Rupert did not look away. I will not. For the first time since he entered, the room seemed to breathe. Then Mrs. Fenner returned from the hall, carrying a 4th card. Adelaide read the name and went very still. Another patron. Another closed door. She placed it atop the others. Then we had better be exact, she said. Rupert looked at her. The old word returned between them, stripped now of playfulness and sharpened into purpose. Accurate, he said. Adelaide met his eyes. At last, before breakfast the next morning, Adelaide lost 2 commissions, 1 patron, and a preliminary study she had spent nearly 3 weeks preparing. The first cancellation arrived in a sealed note, written with such careful politeness that its cruelty seemed almost refined. The second came without explanation. The 3rd delivery hurt more. A servant brought back a wrapped portfolio containing a charcoal study of Lady Harbury's niece, unopened since Adelaide had sent it for approval. The wax seal was still intact. No one had even looked. Adelaide stood beside the small drawing-room table while Mrs. Fenner removed the outer paper and laid the portfolio down. "They sent it back untouched," Mrs. Fenner said. Adelaide looked at the seal. "That was efficient of them. You are allowed to be angry." "I am." "You do not sound angry. That is because anger does not improve charcoal." Mrs. Fenner watched her carefully. Adelaide picked up the returned portfolio and placed it beside the stack of calling cards. 4 yesterday. 3 more this morning. The speed of the damage impressed her in a bleak way. London society could spend weeks deciding whether a hemline was appropriate. Yet it required only hours to destroy a woman's name. By 10 o'clock, a new version of the scandal had already begun circulating. Adelaide learned of it from a short anonymous note delivered without a crest. It claimed that she had deliberately encouraged the confidence of a traumatized duke, imagined a personal attachment where none existed, accepted money to alter the portrait, and invented sabotage after being rejected. Lady Prudence, according to the same account, had tried nobly to protect the dignity of Davenhurst House. Adelaide read the note twice, not because she believed it, because lies revealed their authors through the details they chose. "They have improved the story," she said. Mrs. Fenner frowned. "Improved? The first version only made me dishonest. This one makes me ambitious, manipulative, and romantically deluded." "That is not an improvement." "For people who prefer scandal to facts, it is." Mrs. Fenner took the note from her. "You should not have to endure this." Adelaide looked at the returned study. "No, but endurance is already required." A knock sounded below. Rupert arrived, moments later announced properly, with his secretary remaining in the hall. Adelaide entered the drawing-room, carrying the unopened portfolio. He saw it immediately. Another cancellation, a returned study. From whom? Lady Harbury's niece. His expression hardened. She had already approved the sitting. Her aunt has apparently improved her taste since yesterday. Rupert looked at the stack of cards, then at Adelaide. The steward's statement arrived. It confirms Basil used the master key cabinet twice during the final week at Davenhurst Court. The broken seal is being preserved. Martha's account is written and signed. The repeated phrase appears in 3 separate letters in Basil's hand. Adelaide set down the portfolio. "Good." Rupert waited. "That is all? What else would you like me to say?" "That it helps." "It helps." "You do not sound relieved." Adelaide looked at him. Relief would be premature. Rupert accepted that, a small change from the man who had once wanted certainty before trust. He reached inside his coat and withdrew another folded paper. "There is more." Adelaide took it. The message contained only a few lines. If the disputed portrait were shown again, details concerning the Duke of Davenhurst's conduct in Crimea would be made public. Beneath that threat was a date. Adelaide read it twice. What happened on the 14th of September? Rupert's face changed. A field transfer outside Sebastopol. Was it widely known? No. Who knew? The officers involved. Few senior men afterward. Sir Basil? Rupert did not answer immediately. Yes. Adelaide placed the warning beside the returned cards. Then whoever wrote this either served there or learned the detail from someone who did. The handwriting proves nothing. No. The language is different from Basil's usual correspondence. Then perhaps the writer wanted it to be. Rupert looked toward the window. Adelaide watched him. The old tension had returned to his shoulders, but this time he did not retreat behind it. "Does the date connect to Philip?" she asked. Rupert's silence answered first. "Yes. How? Not directly. At least I did not think so." And now he looked at her. Now I am less certain what I was ever told in full." Adelaide folded the warning. "That is what frightens them." "What?" "Not the portrait." Rupert's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "They erased your scar because they wanted a version of you that served them. Now they are threatening your past because they need your memory to remain equally convenient." He said nothing. Adelaide continued. "They are not only trying to erase what you look like, they are trying to control what you remember." Something in his expression sharpened. "And you still intend to proceed with another public viewing?" "More than before." "Adelaide, this has already cost you work." "Yes, it may cost more, yes, and the letter may contain more than a threat." "Probably." He studied her. "You are remarkably calm." "No, I am choosing not to perform fear for an audience that has already decided what it means." The answer silenced him. Adelaide moved to the easel near the far window. A fresh canvas stood there. Rupert followed her gaze. "You have started something. I intend to." "What?" Adelaide removed the cloth. Faint charcoal lines marked the shape of a head and shoulders. Rupert became still. Another portrait. Not another. She looked at him, the true one. From memory, from studies, from the charcoal drawing, from weeks of looking at you while you tried not to be looked at. His gaze remained on the canvas. "Why?" Adelaide picked up a pencil. "Because the altered painting is now evidence. It no longer belongs only to me as work. And this one will." She drew the first stronger line along the brow. "I will finish it. I will sign it with my full name, and I will show it in the same house where they used my name beneath a lie." Rupert looked at her. "You have already decided." "Yes. What do you need from me?" No argument. No offer to hide her. No command. Adelaide noticed the difference. The original studies, the charcoal sketch, the altered portrait preserved exactly as it is, the broken seal, Basil's letters, the forged agreement, Martha's statement, and every record concerning access to the orangery. Done. I also need you not to interfere with how I present the evidence. Agreed. That quickly. I am learning. A trace of warmth moved through her before she could stop it. Slowly. Painfully. She almost smiled. Almost. Rupert looked again at the warning letter. There may be one thing I can do immediately. What? Find out why that date was chosen. How? He looked toward the fireplace, but his attention had gone somewhere much farther away. There was a campaign case after Crimea. Personal papers, field inventories, reports. Basil kept it for a time because he handled correspondence while I recovered. Adelaide's hand stopped above the canvas. Where is it now? At Davenhurst House, locked away. And you have not opened it in years. No, why not? Rupert touched the scar without seeming to know he had done so, because I believed I already knew what it contained. Adelaide looked at the warning letter. Perhaps that is what someone hoped. He met her eyes. Then he left to search for the case. Adelaide remained at the easel. By afternoon, the outline of Rupert's face had emerged. Not the face society preferred. Not the face Basil needed. The real one. Adelaide worked until the light weakened. Then she moved to the lower right corner and wrote her name in full before the paint had even begun. Adelaide Merefield, 1863. She did not hesitate. Across London, Rupert entered a locked room at Davenhurst House and opened an old campaign case that had once passed through Basil Crowther's hands. Beneath faded reports, military maps, and a packet of field inventories, he found a folded letter. The handwriting belonged to Philip. Rupert read Philip's letter 3 times before the meaning of it settled fully into him. The paper was thin with age, folded along lines that had grown soft from years of neglect. Yet the handwriting remained unmistakable. Philip's letters had always leaned forward across the page, as though even ink could not persuade him to move slowly. Rupert stood beside the open campaign case in the locked room at Davenhurst House and read the final paragraph again. Philip had left his assigned position voluntarily. He had seen wounded men beyond the line and gone to help bring them back. No command from Rupert had sent him there. No confused order had placed him in danger. Philip had chosen. Rupert lowered the letter. For years, he had believed his own judgment had caused his brother's death. Basil had known that belief. Basil had been there. Basil had handled the campaign correspondence while Rupert recovered. And this letter had remained hidden in a case that passed through his hands. Relief should have come first. It did not. Grief did. Not the old grief that crushed everything beneath guilt, but something cleaner and therefore harder to avoid. Philip was still dead. The years were still gone. The scar still crossed Rupert's face. Truth could not return a brother. It could only remove the lie that had stood beside the grave. Rupert sat down slowly. A memory came to him without warning. They had been boys at Davenhurst Court, perhaps 12 and 8, caught in a summer storm near the stables. Everyone had run for shelter except Philip, who turned back because a young stable boy had fallen in the mud beside a frightened horse. Rupert had shouted at him to leave it. Philip had ignored him, helped the boy to his feet, and returned soaked through and grinning. Rupert had called him a fool. Philip had shrugged and said, "Leaving someone behind is the only cowardice worth fearing." Rupert closed his eyes. Of course, Philip had gone back. Not because Rupert ordered it, because Philip had always gone back. The realization struck deeper than absolution. His brother had not died as the victim of Rupert's failure. He had died behaving exactly like the man he had always been. Rupert opened his eyes and looked again at the letter. "You stubborn fool," he said softly. His voice broke on the last word, but no one was there to hear it. By late morning, he stood in Adelaide's drawing room with the letter folded inside his coat. Mrs. Fenner remained in the adjoining room with the door open. Rupert's secretary waited below. Adelaide was at the easel when he entered, working on the second portrait. She looked at his face once and set down the brush. "You found something." It was not a question. Rupert took out the letter. "Philip wrote this." Adelaide did not reach for it immediately. "When?" "Before the engagement outside Sebastopol." He held it out. She accepted it with both hands and read in silence. Rupert watched her eyes move across the page. When she finished, she looked at him carefully. He left his assigned position by choice. "Yes, to help wounded men. Yes. You did not order him there." Rupert looked toward the window. "No." The word felt too small for the years it had just changed. Adelaide folded the letter exactly along its old lines and returned it to him, and Sir Basil had access to this case. He handled campaign papers while I recovered. The anonymous warning mentioned a field transfer date. That made me remember the inventories. I found the case because of that. Adelaide's expression sharpened. "So the letter was not found by chance?" "No." "Do you know whether Basil read it?" "Not yet." "Do you believe he did?" Rupert's jaw tightened. "Yes." Adelaide said nothing for a moment. Rupert expected comfort. Perhaps anger. Instead, she asked, "What are you going to do?" "Not yet." His eyes lifted to hers. "He allowed me to believe I killed my brother. And if you confront him now, he will deny reading the letter, destroy whatever else remains, and prepare a better lie." Rupert said nothing. Adelaide stepped closer to the easel. "You already know he used guilt to influence you." Now we need to know whether he also altered the portrait and forged the agreement. You think those acts are connected? I think he feared the same thing in every case. What? You becoming harder to control? Rupert looked at the unfinished portrait. The scar was already visible in charcoal and underpainting. You make it sound simple. No, I make it sound connected. He looked at her. There is a difference, usually. The familiar rhythm almost softened the room. Almost. Adelaide glanced toward the letter in his hand. The truth does not return your brother. Rupert's expression changed. No, but it should end the sentence you were serving for a crime you did not commit. He went still. No one had spoken to him that way before. Most people had tried to free him by denying pain. Adelaide did not. She separated grief from guilt and left both standing where they belonged. Rupert looked down at Philip's handwriting. I do not know what to do with that yet. You do not have to know today. He nodded once. Then he took a breath. We should list what we have. Adelaide moved to the table. Together, they arranged the evidence in order. The altered portrait, the broken seal, Martha's statement, the steward's confirmation of Basil's access to the master keys. The phrase fit for public regard repeated in Basil's correspondence, the anonymous warning containing a military date known only to a narrow group of officers, Philip's letter. The original charcoal study, the second true portrait. It is a pattern, Rupert said. Yes, but not complete proof. Not yet. Rupert looked at her. How long before the portrait is finished? A day, perhaps less. And then, we invite the same kind of people who watched me leave. You are certain? Adelaide's gaze sharpened. Rupert corrected himself before she could. Not whether you should do it, whether you want to. Some of the tension left her face. Yes. Rupert nodded. Then tell me what you need. The gallery secured before the viewing. No one enters without your knowledge. The altered portrait preserved exactly as it is. Martha protected from pressure, but not coached. Philip's handwriting authenticated by men who knew him. That can be done. And when the room is full, I speak first. Rupert held her gaze. Yes. You do not explain me, no. You do not stand in front of me. Something tightened in his chest. Where then? Adelaide looked at him steadily. Beside me. Rupert nodded. Then tell me where to stand. For one brief moment, neither moved. Adelaide's hand rested near the edge of the table, 2 fingers darkened with charcoal. Rupert noticed. She noticed him noticing. What? She asked. Nothing. That is rarely true. He lifted one hand slightly. You have charcoal on your fingers. Adelaide looked down. An occupational hazard. May I? Her eyes returned to his. May you what? Clean it. The request was simple. The permission was not. After a pause, Adelaide held out her hand. Rupert took a clean cloth from the work table and carefully wiped the charcoal from her fingertips. He touched no more than necessary. When he finished, he released her at once. Adelaide looked at her hand, then at him. Thank you. You are welcome. The silence changed. It did not become romance. Not yet. But trust had entered it again, cautiously. Rupert stepped back first. Finish the portrait. One eyebrow rose. That sounded like an order. A badly phrased request. You are improving? Slowly, painfully. He almost smiled. By evening, the portrait was nearly complete. Invitations were prepared for a private viewing at Davenhurst House. Lady Prudence accepted. Sir Basil accepted. 2 former officers agreed to authenticate Philip's handwriting. Then, shortly before dusk, Rupert's secretary arrived carrying a thin bundle of old correspondence taken from a locked file Basil had once used. Inside was an unfinished draft note. Rupert read the first line. Fit for public regard. He looked at Adelaide. She stepped closer. A second page was folded beneath it. On that page, in Basil Crowther's unmistakable hand, were 7 words. The left cheek must be made suitable. By the following morning, the evidence had become dangerous enough that silence itself felt watched. Sir Basil and Lady Prudence had both accepted the invitation to the private viewing. 2 former officers had agreed to authenticate Philip's handwriting. Martha's statement was secured. The altered portrait remained under guard at Davenhurst House. Yet before noon, Rupert received word that one of the former officers had been approached by an unnamed gentleman and advised to reconsider involving himself in a matter that could damage reputations far beyond the gallery. The officer had not withdrawn his statement, but the warning was clear. Basil was still moving. Rupert found Adelaide in the smaller drawing room where the second portrait stood nearly complete. She was adjusting the tone beneath the left eye, working with such concentration that she did not look up when he entered. "Something has happened," she said. Rupert stopped. "How do you know?" "You close doors more carefully when you are angry." He glanced back at the door. "I was not aware of that." "You are not aware of several things until someone points them out. You seem to enjoy that role, only when necessary." She set down the brush and turned toward him. "What happened?" Rupert told her about the officer. Her expression sharpened, but did not change dramatically. "Did he withdraw?" "No, then whoever pressured him failed, for now." Adelaide looked toward the portrait. "And you are considering cancelling the exhibition?" Rupert said nothing. She waited. "Yes," he admitted. "Why?" "Because Basil is still acting. Because Prudence has accepted the invitation without hesitation. Because the warning letter proves they know enough about Crimea to create damage even if the truth does not support them. Because you have already lost commissions, been publicly accused, and had your name used beneath a lie." Adelaide listened without interrupting. Rupert continued, "I can end this privately. Basil can be removed from every position connected to my house. The Sedgwick alliance can be ended without further discussion. The evidence can be placed with solicitors. Your name can be defended through my authority. You would not have to stand before the same people who watched you leave." Adelaide looked at him for a long moment. "And where would I stand instead?" Rupert frowned. "What do you mean, while you defend me through your authority? Where am I?" "Safe." "That was not my question." He understood before she spoke again. The knowledge showed in his face. Adelaide's voice remained calm. "You cannot love the woman who refused to erase your face and then ask her to erase herself." Rupert went still. There it was, the truth he had nearly avoided seeing. He had mistaken fear for care again. Only this time he recognized the error before defending it. "You are right," he said. Adelaide blinked, almost surprised by the speed of the answer. Rupert continued, "I am afraid of what the room may do to you. It has already done its worst." "I am not certain of that. Neither am I." She met his eyes. "But fear does not earn the right to decide for me." Rupert lowered his gaze for 1 second, then looked back at her. "Then tell me how to stand beside you." The question changed the room. Adelaide did not answer immediately. She seemed to measure whether he understood the words or merely wanted to escape the mistake. At last she said, "Do not speak first." "Agreed. Do not interrupt when Basil accuses me." Rupert's jaw tightened. "Agreed. Do not explain my work for me. Do not tell the room what I meant. Let me tell them." "Yes, and when I ask you to speak, speak only for yourself." Rupert nodded. "Then where do I stand?" Adelaide looked at him steadily. "Beside me, not ahead, not behind. I remember good." A faint warmth touched her expression. Rupert allowed himself one breath of relief. "You are very severe. You require repetition. I have been told I am difficult, mostly by me. Then the evidence is reliable." This time she almost smiled. The moment passed quickly, but it mattered. Rupert moved toward the table where the old correspondence lay. The unfinished draft note rested beside Basil's other letters. Fit for public regard, beneath it, the second page carried the 7 words that had changed the case. The left cheek must be made suitable. Adelaide came to stand beside him. "It is stronger than everything else we had." "Strong enough?" Rupert asked. "Strong enough to force an explanation. Not necessarily enough to prove who altered the painting." "No. And Prudence?" Adelaide looked at the line again. She wanted the scar removed from the beginning. But wanting something and ordering forgery are not the same. Rupert studied her. "You intend to be fair to her." "I intend to be accurate, even now, especially now." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "That is why you must speak first." Adelaide's fingers rested near the edge of the paper. "There is something else you should know." Rupert waited. She turned toward him fully. "Trust is returning." He did not move. The words seemed to enter him carefully, as though too much reaction might frighten them away. "I do not expect that to mean forgiveness is complete," he said. "It does not, or that the past has disappeared." "No. Then I will not ask for more than you have offered." Adelaide studied him. The man before her was not the same one who had asked her to leave the gallery while society judged her. Nor was he completely free of fear. That mattered more. Change without struggle would have felt false. "Rupert," she said softly. It was the first time she had used his Christian name. He heard it. She saw the effect. Neither pretended otherwise. "There is one thing I have not said, because I did not want it to become another demand on you." Adelaide's breathing changed slightly. "What?" "I love you." He spoke without urgency. No dramatic confession. No step forward. "I am not saying it to stop the exhibition. I am not saying it to earn forgiveness. I am not saying it because I believe love gives me authority over your choices." Adelaide remained silent. Rupert continued. "I am saying it because tomorrow will be noisy, and I do not want the truth of this hidden beneath that noise." She looked away for a moment. When she looked back, her eyes were brighter, though her voice remained steady. "I do not know what I can promise you yet." "Then promise nothing. Trust is returning. I can say that. It is enough." Adelaide almost smiled. "You are improving, slowly, very slowly, painfully." This time she did smile. Rupert looked at her hand resting on the table. He did not touch it. Adelaide noticed. She said. His eyes returned to hers. "May I kiss you?" She hesitated only a moment. "Yes." He stepped closer. The kiss was brief and restrained. More recognition than possession. When he drew back, Adelaide did not look away. Neither did he. Then the door opened, and Rupert's secretary entered, carrying another folder. "Forgive me, Your Grace, Miss Merefield. We found something else among Sir Basil's papers." Rupert stepped back at once. Adelaide turned. The secretary placed a page beside the draft note. The handwriting was Basil's. The sentence was incomplete, but one line had been written clearly enough to read. "The left cheek must be made suitable before London sees it." Adelaide stared at the words. Rupert's expression hardened. When was this written? During the final week at Davenhurst Court. The secretary hesitated. "There is more. A notation in the margin refers to Lady Prudence." Adelaide looked up. "What does it say?" The secretary unfolded the page fully. "P. insists there must be no mark left to disturb the arrangement." Silence settled. It was not a confession, not yet, but it was the first direct bridge between Basil's instruction and Prudence's desire. Adelaide looked at Rupert. Now we let them speak. By late afternoon, the gallery was ready. The altered portrait stood veiled on the left. The charcoal study rested under glass at the centre. The true portrait waited on the right, Adelaide's full name visible beneath it. The broken seal, forged agreement, Basil's letters, Philip's letter, and witness statements were arranged nearby. Voices gathered beyond the closed doors. Lady Prudence had arrived. So had Sir Basil. Rupert stood beside Adelaide, exactly where she had told him to stand. "Are you ready?" he asked. Adelaide placed one hand on the door handle. "No," Rupert almost smiled. "Neither am I." "Good. Why?" She looked at him. "Because people who feel no fear before telling the truth usually do not understand the cost of it." Then Adelaide opened the gallery doors. The gallery fell silent when Adelaide entered, not because she wore jewels, rank, or triumph, but because the same room that had watched her leave in disgrace now had to watch her return by choice. Rupert walked beside her and stopped exactly where she had instructed him to stand. Not ahead, not behind, to her left, Lady Prudence stood near the marble fireplace in pale silver silk, composed enough to suggest that nothing in the world had ever surprised her. Sir Basil Crowther occupied a place among the political men. With the controlled ease of someone who still believed confidence could outlast evidence, around them gathered patrons, artists, titled women, former clients, and several gentlemen who had witnessed Adelaide's humiliation. She saw Lady Harbury among them. The returned calling card had not been forgotten. Adelaide looked toward the three objects arranged beneath the lamps. On the left stood the altered portrait. At the center rested the original charcoal study beneath glass. On the right waited the second portrait, uncovered, Rupert's scar visible, and Adelaide's full signature written beneath it. Adelaide Merefield, 1863. She drew one breath. "Some of you were present when a portrait bearing my name was unveiled in this room," she said. The Duke of Davenhurst's scar had been removed. A document bearing my signature was produced to suggest that I had accepted payment for the alteration. I left without proving my innocence. No one interrupted. Adelaide continued. "Today, I ask for no sympathy. I ask only that you look carefully." She crossed to the altered portrait. A servant extinguished 2 lamps, leaving one positioned at an angle. Adelaide adjusted it herself. Light moved across the painted left cheek. At first, the surface appeared smooth. Then the difference emerged. A thin, uneven sheen. A faint ridge where newer pigment rested above older glaze. "Oil paint dries in layers," Adelaide said. "A later edition does not become part of the original merely because it is skillfully applied. The scar was present when this portrait left my hands. The paint that hides it was added afterward." Basil spoke calmly. "That proves alteration. It does not prove who altered it." Adelaide turned toward him. "No, it does not." She lifted the broken studio seal. "The orangery at Davenhurst Court was sealed after I completed the work. This impression appeared intact until examined closely. Rupert's secretary carried it to 2 gentlemen nearest the table. It was broken," Adelaide said, then reheated and pressed back into place. Basil's expression remained unreadable. Still no proof against me. Not alone. Before Adelaide could call her, Martha stepped forward from the rear of the room. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "I saw Sir Basil near the orangery after Miss Merefield had left for the evening." Basil turned. A nervous servant girl's memory is hardly conclusive. Martha flinched, then lifted her chin. I saw a ring of keys in your hand, sir. It had the flat brass tag used on the household master set. The steward stepped forward next. The household keys are kept on such a ring. Sir Basil requested access to the key cabinet twice during the final week at Davenhurst Court. Basil looked at Rupert. For official business. Rupert said nothing. He had promised not to speak first. Adelaide continued. Access is not proof. A witness is not proof. A broken seal is not proof. But patterns matter. She lifted the forged agreement. This document contains the phrase fit for public regard. Basil's eyes changed slightly. Adelaide placed 3 letters beside it. The same phrase appears repeatedly in Sir Basil's private correspondence concerning political dinners, Lady Prudence's position, and His Grace's public image after the war. Basil gave a short, cold smile. A phrase is not a signature. No. Adelaide lifted another page. This is. The room sharpened around the sound of paper. Rupert's secretary had authenticated the handwriting against Basil's known correspondence. Adelaide read aloud. The left cheek must be made suitable before London sees it. Basil's face lost a fraction of its colour. A private memorandum discussing presentation. Then why? Adelaide asked. Was the scar removed exactly where your instructions specified? Silence. Basil looked toward Prudence. She did not return the glance. Adelaide unfolded the page fully. There is also a notation in the margin. P. Insists there must be no mark left to disturb the arrangement. Prudence's composure tightened. That proves nothing. I only wanted the portrait corrected before it reached London. The words landed before she could retrieve them. Adelaide turned toward her. Corrected before it reached London? Prudence froze. Adelaide's voice remained calm. I had not yet told this room when the alteration was intended. A murmur moved through the guests. Prudence looked at Basil. Do not stand there as though this was mine alone. Basil's control cracked. You were the one who said you would not enter marriage beside a face society pitied. Prudence went white, and you were the one who said the alteration would secure the alliance. Because my future depended on what you had already demanded. Your future? Her voice sharpened. You built your ambitions around a marriage that did not exist. Basil answered too quickly. A marriage you were determined to force into existence. The room listened as the 2 people who had once spoken in coordinated half-truths began exposing one another. Adelaide did not interrupt. She waited until silence returned. Then she looked at Prudence. You wanted the scar erased because it disturbed the arrangement. Prudence's face hardened. I wanted the Duke as he ought to be remembered. Distinguished, strong, unmarked by one terrible chapter. Adelaide looked at Rupert, then back at her. And who decides which parts of another human being's society is entitled to erase? No one answered. Rupert stepped forward. He turned the scarred side of his face fully toward the room. Adelaide saw several guests look directly at it for the first time. Rupert's voice was quiet. This woman was ordered to lie about my face. When she refused, her name was used beneath that lie. And when she was accused, I failed her once by allowing my doubt to speak through silence. The gallery became utterly still. Rupert looked only at Adelaide. I should have stood beside you that night. I did not. I was wrong. Adelaide did not rescue him from the discomfort of the admission. She simply inclined her head. Rupert then lifted Philip's letter. For years, I believed my own command sent my brother to his death in Crimea. Sir Basil knew that belief. He reinforced it. Yet this letter, written in Philip's own hand, states that he left his assigned position by choice to aid wounded men. 2 former officers stepped forward and confirmed the handwriting. Rupert continued. The anonymous threat sent to stop this exhibition contained a field transfer date known to only a narrow group of officers. Sir Basil was among them. Basil said, "You cannot prove I wrote that warning." "Perhaps not yet," Rupert replied, "but I can prove that you had access to the studio, that your own words directed, alteration of my left cheek, that your political future depended on the Sedgwick alliance, and that you spent years preserving a guilt that made me easier to influence." Basil's mouth hardened. "Everything I did was for the stability of the dukedom." Rupert's gaze cooled. "No, everything you did was for the power you borrowed from it." He stepped closer. "You are dismissed from every position connected to House Redbourne. Every political recommendation made in your favor is withdrawn. Your anticipated appointment is finished. The forged agreement, the altered portrait, the broken seal, and the related correspondence will be placed with my solicitors for formal action." Basil looked around the room and found no ally willing to meet his eyes. Rupert turned to Prudence. "There will be no alliance between House Redbourne and House Sedgwick." Her lips parted. "Rupert, you wanted a version of me without the scar. You may now live without the title you expected beside it." No applause followed. Adelaide was grateful. Applause would have made justice a performance. Instead, an elderly artist stepped forward and stood before the true portrait. He studied Rupert's painted face for a long time, then looked at Adelaide's signature. "Miss Merefield, with your permission, I would like to recommend this work for wider exhibition under your full name." Adelaide's breath caught. "My full name? There is no other one on the canvas." Lady Agneta Belmore stepped forward next. "Nor should there be on certain older works." Adelaide looked at her. Lady Agneta continued, "A portrait in my family collection contains Miss Merefield's hand. I will have that contribution formally acknowledged." Something in Adelaide's chest tightened. Not everything stolen could be restored, but something could be named. One by one, guests approached the table. Some apologized, some lacked the courage. Before the room emptied, calling cards began to appear beside Adelaide's portfolio. Lady Harbury placed hers among them without speaking. Adelaide looked at it once, then looked away. No applause, recognition. At last, the gallery was nearly empty. Rupert stood beside the true portrait. The scar remained visible. So did the man beneath it. "May I ask you something now that no one else is listening?" he said. Adelaide looked at him. "Yes. Can you imagine choosing a life with me while remaining fully Adelaide Merefield?" Her heart answered before pride could. Still, she looked at the charcoal study, then at the true portrait, then at Rupert himself. "Ask me again at Davenhurst Court," she said softly, "when neither of us is standing beneath anyone else's judgment." Several months later, spring had deepened across Hampshire, and Davenhurst Court no longer felt to Adelaide like a place she had entered under temporary permission. The lawns had turned green. The old trees had filled with leaves. Morning light crossed the terraces and reached the restored orangery in long, pale bands. Inside, the broken panes had been replaced, the floors repaired, and new shelves lined one wall. Brushes, jars of pigment, stretched canvases, and finished studies stood in orderly rows. Every invoice on Adelaide's desk carried her full name, Adelaide Merefield. She still paused sometimes when she saw it written beneath a completed work, but the pause no longer came from fear. It came from the knowledge that no one else would be allowed to sign for what she created. London had not become kinder after the gallery confrontation. It had simply become more careful. Sir Basil Crowther lost every position connected to House Redbourne. Rupert withdrew all political recommendations made on his behalf, and the long-anticipated appointment Basil had spent years arranging disappeared with them. The forged agreement, altered portrait, broken studio seal, and surviving correspondence were placed with solicitors. Formal proceedings followed over the forgery and interference with commissioned property. Basil did not return to the political circles that had once welcomed him through Rupert's influence. His name became associated not with service, but with manipulation. Lady Prudence Sedgwick lost the alliance she had treated as inevitable. Her family withdrew her from the London season after her. Knowledge of the alteration became public, and the social leverage she expected from becoming Duchess of Davenhurst vanished with Rupert's refusal. Society, with its usual talent for forgetting its own certainty, soon began calling the entire affair regrettable. Adelaide found that almost amusing. People were often quickest to call something regrettable when admitting guilt would be inconvenient. Her own career changed more slowly and, therefore, more honestly. The true portrait was accepted for wider exhibition under her full name. New commissions arrived. She refused some, accepted others. For the first time, choice belonged to her. Lady Agneta Belmore kept her promise as well. An old portrait in her family collection was formally noted as containing substantial work by Adelaide Merefield, and that acknowledgement led to a second. Then, a third. Not every painting could be reclaimed. Some truths had been buried too long. Yet enough were named that the silence surrounding her father's final years began to break. One bright morning in May, Adelaide entered the orangery and found a single iron key resting at the center of her work table. No note, no ribbon, no elaborate box, just the key. Rupert stood several feet away near the windows, one hand behind his back. Adelaide picked it up. "What is this?" "Yours." She looked around the restored room. "You have said that before." "No, I said the room was available to you during the commission. And now it is yours to use if you choose, empty if you do not." Adelaide studied him. "You restored an entire orangery and expect me to believe you have no preference about whether I remain?" "I have a very strong preference." "I thought so." "Preference is not ownership." The words settled between them. Rupert stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. "If you leave, the room remains yours. If you stay, it remains yours. If you paint here every day or once a year, it remains yours." Adelaide closed her fingers around the key. "And if I refuse it, then I will be disappointed privately and behave with dignity." A smile touched her mouth. "That sounds difficult for you. Unbearable." She looked toward the tall northern windows. "You planned this carefully. I have learned that careless arrangements provoke you. Also true." Rupert drew one slow breath. "You told me to ask again here." Adelaide became still. The empty gallery in London returned to her. The true portrait, the calling cards, his question, her answers. "Ask me again at Davenhurst Court." Rupert did not kneel. He did not produce a ring before she had spoken. He did not surround the moment with witnesses, expectation, or rank. He simply stood before her, with the scar fully turned toward the light. "Adelaide Merefield," he said, "can you imagine choosing a life with me while remaining fully yourself?" She looked at him for a long moment. "That is not the traditional question. I have lost faith in traditions that are badly designed. A dangerous position for a duke. I have survived worse." Adelaide glanced at the key in her palm. "And what would this life require of me?" "Nothing you do not choose. That is an impossible promise." Then let me be exact. She looked up. Rupert continued, I will not ask you to stop painting. I will not ask you to hide your name beneath mine. I will not call obedience love. I will not use protection as an excuse to decide for you. I will fail sometimes, because I have already proved I am capable of it. When I do, I will listen when you tell me. Something tightened in Adelaide's throat. And if we disagree, then we disagree. You are a duke, so I have been told. You are accustomed to being obeyed, less than before. Good. Rupert almost smiled. Adelaide's expression softened, then became serious again. Love does not erase what happened in that gallery. No. It does not return trust simply because you want it. No. And I will not be grateful merely because you chose me. I would be disappointed if you were. She held his gaze. Why? Because I did not make you worthy by loving you. The answer reached her more deeply than flattery ever could. Rupert continued, I noticed what was already there. Late, perhaps, imperfectly, but it was there before me. Silence filled the orangery. Adelaide looked at the key, then at the scar she had painted twice and watched others erase once. She no longer saw guilt when she'd looked at it. Neither did he. That was the real change. Not forgetting, not correction. Truth replacing the meaning others had imposed. Yes, she said. Rupert did not move. Yes, do not become insufferable. I make no promises. Adelaide laughed softly. Then yes, I will marry you. Relief crossed his face so openly that she loved him more for not hiding it. He reached into his coat, then stopped. May I? You have a ring. And you waited, painfully. She held out her left hand, then put it on. He did. Their wedding took place weeks later in the chapel at Davenhurst Court. With only family, a few trusted friends, Mrs. Fenner, Lady Agneta, and members of the household present. There was no London spectacle, and no ballroom waiting to measure the bride. Adelaide entered the chapel as Adelaide Merefield, and left as the Duchess of Davenhurst, without surrendering the name that had once been denied her. The marriage settlement preserved her artistic earnings and independence. Rupert had insisted on that before she could. Adelaide then insisted on reading every line herself. He expected nothing less. By midsummer, the orangery had become a true studio. Martha returned as Adelaide's assistant by choice and no longer apologized before every mistake. Mrs. Fenner visited often and claimed the light improved her embroidery, though no one believed that was the real reason. Adelaide accepted commissions selectively. Rupert sat for no further formal portraits. One had been enough. One morning, Adelaide entered the orangery before breakfast. Sunlight filled the glass room and touched the two works hanging side by side on the far wall. The first was the original charcoal study on brown paper. The second was the completed portrait with the scar untouched and Adelaide's full name beneath it. Rupert came in quietly and stood beside her. He no longer turned his left side toward shadow. He no longer paused when light crossed the scar. Adelaide looked from the painted face to the real one. "Do you ever wish I had made you more handsome?" she asked. Frequently. She turned toward him. He almost smiled. "No, good answer. Accurate answer." Adelaide looked back at the portrait. Morning light crossed the painted scar, then the real one. Rupert did not turn away. Adelaide lifted no brush. There was nothing left to correct.